The alien vessel hung in low orbit, a sleek predator against the backdrop of the stars. It was not the first of its kind to visit Earth, but unlike those who came in secrecy, this one had no intention of hiding. The broadcast arrived on every channel, hijacking signals with a voice that dripped with contempt. "We have studied you," it declared in crisp, almost disdainful English. "Your wars, your weapons, your desperate grasp for significance in a vast universe. Amusing." A brief pause, then the voice hardened. "We are the Kthari, hunters, and you, creatures of Earth, are unworthy prey." The message continued, explaining their purpose with cruel amusement. The Kthari traveled the galaxy in search of challenges, worthy adversaries to test their skills against. They had expected something of Earth, perhaps not greatness, but at least competence. What they found, instead, were crude machines and primitive ballistics. They displayed holograms of human rifles and missiles, then overlaid them with images of their own sleek plasma weapons, demonstrating the laughable contrast. To struggle against us would be like an insect flailing beneath a boot. Then came the offer, one not extended out of respect, but sport. A hunt. A single human would be given the chance to prove Earth's worth. If victorious, humanity would be spared from conquest. If they failed, Earth would be marked as a game world, a playground where lesser species could be pursued for sport. The world's leaders fell into disarray. Panic and debate rippled across nations, but in the end, the question remained, who would fight? Militaries scrambled for solutions. Tactical analysts pored over every scrap of information available on the Kthari, but nothing suggested their weapons could be countered. Brute force was not an option. Technology would not win the day. Then, amid the noise, one man stepped forward. Captain Marcus Hayes had seen more battlefields than he cared to count. He had lived in the long shadows of war, where patience and precision mattered more than the size of one's arsenal. A sniper by trade, he had spent years in the frozen peaks of the Hindu Kush, the dense jungles of South America, and the shifting sands of the Middle East. The kill didn't come from power, it came from stillness, from the quiet moment where breath, wind, and heartbeat aligned. He watched the Kthari broadcasts, noting their posture, the way they moved. They were fast, strong, but arrogance bled from every word they spoke. They were used to overwhelming their enemies, relying on technology rather than true skill. That would be their weakness. When the time came to present humanity's champion, Marcus volunteered without hesitation. He stood before the cameras, addressing not just the aliens, but his own people. "You think we are weak," he said, voice calm but edged with steel. "That our weapons are simple. That we don't understand the hunt. You're wrong." He slung his sniper rifle over his shoulder, a weapon they had mocked just hours ago. "We don't need energy blades or plasma cannons. A bullet, placed well, is all it takes to kill anything." The Kthari did not take him seriously. Laughter crackled through the communication channels, a guttural, clicking sound. One of their commanders, a towering creature draped in shimmering armor, appeared on the screen. "Very well, human. Amuse us." The conditions were set. The battlefield chosen. A remote stretch of land, untamed wilderness where technology would not dictate the outcome. The Kthari deployed their hunters, each clad in reactive armor and wielding weapons far beyond human capabilities. Marcus, in contrast, carried nothing but his rifle, a pack of essentials, and the weight of the world on his shoulders. As he walked into the wild, leaving behind the final vestiges of civilization, he felt none of the fear others expected him to feel. The Kthari had laughed at humanity's weapons. That was their mistake. Because war was not about weapons. It was about the ones who wielded them. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Marcus lay prone on a ridge, his body molded to the terrain, his rifle steady as stone. Below, the Kthari moved like wraiths, their sleek forms slipping through the underbrush with unnatural grace. They had begun their hunt, confident in their victory, unaware they were already being watched. He had counted 6 of them, 3 advancing directly through the valley, 2 flanking from the east, and 1 lingering behind, likely a commander overseeing the slaughter to come. They moved without urgency, expecting their prey to run, to panic. But Marcus was not prey. Through his scope, he studied their armor. It was unlike anything on Earth, segmented plates that pulsed with an iridescent shimmer, bending light and distorting their silhouettes. A lesser soldier would have assumed them untouchable. But Marcus had spent years understanding the vulnerabilities of armored targets. No matter how advanced the technology, everything had weak points. He found one in the way their joints moved. The shimmering plates flexed over muscle and sinew, but the gaps, small as they were, existed. Knees. Elbows. The thin plating where the helmet met the collar. That was where the bullets would go. He adjusted his aim, controlled his breath, and squeezed the trigger. The report of the rifle cracked through the valley, a sound as sharp and sudden as a lightning strike. In the same instant, one of the hunters stumbled. For a fraction of a second, it did not seem to understand what had happened. Then its leg buckled, the joint obliterated by the impact, and it collapsed with a choked snarl. The others reacted instantly. They scattered, vanishing into the foliage in a blur of motion. Marcus remained still, watching through the scope, waiting. The fallen Kthari clawed at the ground, dragging itself toward cover, its once arrogant movements reduced to desperate scrabbling. Marcus fired again, this time at the exposed seam beneath the creature's jaw. The body went still. For the first time, the Kthari knew fear. The hunt had begun. They adapted quickly. The valley that had once been their playground was now a battlefield, and they moved through it with newfound caution. Their armor shifted, their forms blending with the trees and rocks, turning them into ghosts against the landscape. But invisibility was not invulnerability. Marcus remained patient. He let the silence stretch, let their uncertainty grow. They would expect him to move after firing, to relocate before they could pinpoint his position. But he did not. He stayed, heartbeat slow, breath measured, watching for the moment impatience would betray them. It came minutes later. One of the Kthari, emboldened by the stillness, advanced. Marcus saw the shift in the leaves, the faintest ripple of distortion as its cloaking wavered. He adjusted his aim, leading the shot just enough, and pulled the trigger. Another body fell. The remaining hunters no longer moved like apex predators. Their fluid grace had stiffened, their confidence eroded. The Kthari had never known prey to fight back like this. They were used to dominance, to overwhelming their targets with sheer technological superiority. Now, against an enemy they had mocked, they hesitated. The commander would not allow that to continue. A roar split the valley, a sound that sent birds scattering from the treetops and rattled through Marcus's bones. It was not a cry of anger, but of command. The Kthari were regrouping, shifting tactics. Their leader had decided that the human would not be hunted like a beast. He would be flushed out, exposed. A pulse of energy rippled through the valley. Trees groaned as an unseen force bent their trunks, scattering leaves in a violent gust. Marcus felt his teeth vibrate from the sheer power of it. A suppression field. They were closing the battlefield, forcing him into movement. Good. He had never intended to stay in one place forever. He moved with practiced efficiency, slipping down the ridge and into the shadows. He had already mapped his escape routes, chosen positions that would give him the high ground when they pursued. The Kthari thought they were driving him out of hiding. They did not realize he was leading them into a kill zone. As he vanished into the wilderness, he heard their snarls behind him, anger, frustration. But beneath that, something else. Doubt. The hunt had started as a show of dominance. Now, for the first time, the hunters were uncertain who was hunting whom. The forest had turned against them. The Kthari, once moving with unshakable confidence, now advanced with measured steps, their luminous armor dimmed to reduce visibility. Their arrogance had been stripped away, replaced with something colder, calculation. They had learned, adapted. The human was no mere prey. He was something else. A force unseen, striking from the shadows, turning their own instincts against them. Marcus crouched behind the twisted roots of an old oak, steadying his rifle as he watched the hunters move through the undergrowth. They were trying to box him in, closing gaps, setting up overlapping fields of vision. Clever, but not enough. The Kthari were skilled, but they lacked patience. Patience was a weapon of its own, sharper than any blade, deadlier than any rifle. Marcus had spent years mastering it, learning the rhythm of war, the heartbeat of a battlefield. And he knew the moment would come when one of them, straining under the weight of their own tension, would make a mistake. He didn't have to wait long. A hunter, barely 5 meters away, shifted too quickly. The faintest scrape of metal against bark. Marcus reacted instantly. He swung his rifle up, sighted the gap beneath the creature's raised arm, and fired. The round punched clean through, exiting in a fine mist of black blood. The Kthari staggered, choking on its own breath, then collapsed. The forest erupted. Plasma fire scorched through the trees, burning away cover as the remaining Kthari retaliated in blind fury. Marcus was already moving, slipping between shadows, vanishing before they could lock onto him. He dove behind a fallen log just as another pulse of energy ripped through the air, vaporizing the space where he had stood seconds ago. Their rage was working against them. He could hear it in their snarls, in the frantic edge to their movements. They were trying to pin him down, force him into the open, but Marcus wasn't playing their game. He wasn't fighting like prey. He was hunting. He slung his rifle over his back and moved deeper into the forest, knowing they would follow. They had to. He was an open wound in their pride, a challenge they could not ignore. Every step they took after him was another step toward the grave he had already dug for them. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then a sound, barely a whisper against the wind, a shift in the canopy, something large moving through the treetops. Marcus froze, scanning the darkness above. It was their commander. The creature landed with inhuman grace, standing taller than the others, its armor thicker, its weapon a curved blade pulsing with crackling energy. This one had not come to hunt. It had come to kill. Marcus exhaled slowly, bracing himself. This would be different. The others had fought with arrogance, with reckless aggression. This one would not. The Kthari commander turned its head slightly, as if studying him, and then it did something none of the others had done. It spoke. "You are not like the rest of your kind." The voice was deep, resonant, carrying none of the mockery from before. Marcus didn't answer. Words wouldn't matter now. The commander raised its weapon in salute. A warrior's gesture. Then it lunged. Marcus rolled, narrowly avoiding the downward strike that sent sparks flying from the stone behind him. He came up on one knee, rifle snapping into place. He fired, once, twice, but the commander moved impossibly fast, dodging with fluid precision. It closed the distance before he could react. Swinging its blade in a wide arc, Marcus barely twisted away, feeling the heat of the weapon as it cut through the air where his head had been. He had no room, no space to maneuver. The fight had shifted. This was no longer a battle of patience. This was survival. The commander pressed forward, relentless, forcing Marcus back with each attack. He ducked, rolled, trying to create distance, but it was too fast. The next strike came low, catching his rifle, sending it spinning from his hands. Unarmed. Outmatched. Marcus didn't hesitate. He reached for his sidearm, firing point-blank. The bullet struck true, but the commander barely flinched. Its armor absorbed the impact, dispersing the kinetic force. Not enough. Not even close. The Kthari lashed out, striking him across the chest. Pain exploded through his ribs as he was thrown backward, skidding across the forest floor. He gasped for breath, blinking against the blinding ache. The commander loomed over him, blade raised for the final blow. Marcus saw his opening. Not in the way the commander stood. Not in its weapon. But in its eyes. The Kthari was confident, sure of its victory. It had already seen him as dead, and that was its mistake. With the last of his strength, Marcus yanked his combat knife free and drove it forward, straight into the exposed gap beneath the commander's arm. The creature let out a choked snarl, staggering back, its blade flickering. Black blood ran in thick streams, dripping to the earth. Marcus forced himself to his feet, chest burning, body screaming for rest. He picked up his rifle, ignoring the tremble in his hands. The commander met his gaze, breathing heavily, the arrogance finally gone from its face. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the Kthari inclined its head ever so slightly, a gesture not of submission, but of understanding. It turned and disappeared into the shadows, vanishing into the night. The hunt was over. For now. The battlefield lay silent. Smoke curled from scorched earth, the scent of ionized air mixing with the dampness of the forest. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, a fragile sound against the weight of what had just transpired. Marcus stood amidst the wreckage, rifle held loosely in one hand, his chest rising and falling in deep, steady breaths. His ribs ached, his body screamed for rest, but he remained standing. That was victory enough. The Kthari commander was gone. Not dead, not defeated in the way its kind had expected, but forced to retreat. A warrior's surrender. It had left not out of fear, but understanding, acknowledgement that humanity was not the weak, mindless prey they had assumed. That realization was worth more than any kill. He stepped over the bodies of the fallen, Kthari blood pooling dark against the soil. These creatures had come believing themselves invincible, assured of their dominance. Now their remains told a different story, one that would spread beyond this place, beyond this single hunt. The message was clear: Earth was no hunting ground. Humanity would not kneel. A low hum crackled through the air, and Marcus looked skyward. The Kthari ship loomed above the treetops, its sleek, obsidian hull reflecting the faint glow of the rising sun. They had been watching. Of course they had. The hunt had never been just about sport. It had been a test, an evaluation of humanity's worth. And now, with their best warriors lying broken in the dirt, they had their answer. A voice, smooth and measured, resonated from the ship's comms. You have defied expectation. It was not the same arrogance from before. No mocking laughter, no taunts. Just the cold, undeniable truth. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow, rifle slung over his shoulder. That's what we do. A pause. Then, the ship began to rise, its engines whispering against the morning sky. The Kthari were leaving. Not in conquest. Not in triumph. But in recognition of a fight they had not anticipated. Marcus exhaled, the weight in his chest easing. The world would never know how close it had come to being nothing more than a game preserve, how thin the line between survival and extinction had been. But that was the way of things. Soldiers fought battles in the shadows so others could live in the light. By the time the first military choppers arrived, their blades slicing through the air in frantic urgency, the war had already been won. Command scrambled for debriefs, scientists begged for analysis, but Marcus gave them little. The details didn't matter. What mattered was that when the Kthari had come to hunt, they had been met not with submission, but with resistance. And resistance had been enough. Days passed. Then weeks. The world moved on, as it always did, but the air was different. The nations of Earth, fractured by centuries of conflict, had seen what lurked beyond their atmosphere. They had seen how close they had come to being nothing more than prey. And something changed. Governments spoke of unity not as an ideal, but as necessity. Military alliances restructured. Weapons research took a new, urgent direction. Marcus watched from a distance, knowing this was only the beginning. The Kthari had left, but they would not forget. The galaxy was vast, filled with predators and prey, with empires that saw planets not as homes, but as resources to be claimed. Earth had survived the first hunt. The next time, they would be ready.